Welcome. Russell Eubanks here, along with my friend and colleague, Randy Marchini, and looking forward to covering this topic today. What's new with the CIS controls? Who am I? Russell Eubanks, been in cyber for a long time. Been privileged to lead in the past the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's cybersecurity team and IT team. Been teaching with SANS for a long time and also on the IANS faculty as well. Randy.
I'm Randy Marchini. Nice to meet all of you. I'm the CISO at Virginia Tech. I've been in that position since 2010. I'm also a SANS instructor. I'm one of the original SANS instructors and one of the charter members for the Center for Internet Security. And so with this, we hope that we give you some information that you can use. Take it away, Russ.
All right, thanks, Randy. I wanted to walk through just a little brief overview for those of you that may not be as familiar with the controls before we introduce version 8 to you. So like it shows here, just a reminder of what the controls are and what they're trying to represent. Really, a focus is not to just have another list of good things to do. Randy and I and CIS, SANS, we all believe that we have plenty of lists of good things to do. Instead, we want to have a prioritized set of things that map to known compliance initiatives, things that when you do them, you can improve and demonstrate how well you can improve your cybersecurity posture as well. They've been around since 2008, and by design, we like to update them to make them current, to make them relevant, and meeting the needs of today, as well as trying to predict the needs that we might have in the future from a control perspective. Again, by design, we update them quite a bit. We focus on quick wins. What are some quick wins where we can create and sustain some momentum so that we can show the advancement to our leadership, to our board, to our governance groups, to show that we're not just staying busy, but we're focusing on a prioritized set of actions that make a big difference. I love Venn diagrams. One of the bottom points that are showing there that shows interfere with attackers getting in, attackers staying in, and attackers doing damage. I love how we can focus on, again, not just staying busy, but focusing on actionable, real, measurable things that we can tie metrics to. And we'll have metrics for each one of these areas to be able to demonstrate where you are and where you want to be in your cyber journey at understanding the implementation of these controls. Why bother using these controls? Again, a key focus here is looking at the ability to measure how well we're doing at applying these controls and using that to show the improvement of our respective cybersecurity programs. Reminds me like when I go to the doctor. Every year I go to the doctor, I get a physical, they do lab work, they take my blood pressure, they do all the things they do, and then I have a conversation with my provider, and my provider, based on what I'm sharing, the concerns that I have, that give me a tailored plan that brings in all that information. And it gives me an idea of things that I should work on. Maybe I should exercise more. Maybe I should eat less desserts at the end of the day. Whatever the advice might be, I can take that and apply that so that when I come back again next year, I get a good report. Very same thing that we want to do with the controls as well, to have measures and metrics that we can use to demonstrate our improvement, to demonstrate our journey of trying to be better, responding faster to events and incidents when they happen. And again, measures and metrics for every single action that we want to take. Why do we want you to do that? Well, Randy and I, we want you to look good to your boss. We want you to stand out and be that rock star that shows where you're at and have a clear path of knowing what to do next to show how you can do that. And then trying to remove some ambiguous language, sometimes looking at the wording when the team worked on this upgrade to version 8, wanted to have some enhancements, some improvements to help make it more clear of the actions that we want you to take, and even better, making it so those actions can be repeatable as well, so that you can do them over and over again. Another area really focuses around alignment that we have here to all the other compliance frameworks. To the best of our knowledge, that we have alignment of every single compliance initiative that we know that exists in the world to map to the critical security controls. Why do we do that? We want to make sure that it's going to be easy for you to do a transition or a translation even for doing a particular action in the controls and getting that double win where you can take the action against the controls and then also gain your compliance requirements, your regulation requirements that are in place. It's going to make your auditors happy by design. And again, the goal isn't to just get a pretty green checkbox. That's good to get your pretty green check boxes. We want you to have your pretty green check boxes, but the goal is to look beyond that. The goal is instead to get to that level of security assurance. How can you know that you know that you know the status of your cybersecurity program? And that's really a big focus that we have in that. With the controls, a big concept that came with the controls comes to have offense inform defense. How can the red team inform the blue team? How can the attackers inform the defenders as we're wanting to put these controls together? The best advice I've ever been given in my whole life came to me from someone that has nothing to do with security, nothing to do with cyber, nothing to do with IT. And the advice is this. That advice is get wisdom as cheaply as you can. Get wisdom as cheaply as you can. What does that look like in cybersecurity? Well, in cybersecurity, we're looking at that to say, how can we learn from the offense? How can we learn from recent breach case studies? Or how can we learn from things that are happening in the cyber ecosystem and take that and get wisdom as cheaply as we can? Learn our lessons from others versus having to repeat the mistakes and repeat the concerns that are happening in different organizations as well. And that's the key design function of version 8 of the controls. Next thing I wanted to share is looking at a practical implementation step that you might be able to use when applying or when choosing to apply a version 8 of the controls and through a 5-step journey. One key area is look for the frameworks that fit. Maybe those decisions have been made for you based on the industry or the regulations that your organization gets to follow by looking at different control frameworks, risk frameworks, and program frameworks as well. Then we invite you to have that mapping of the controls of those frameworks to the controls themselves. And you'll see a little excerpt that shows here of where we're doing a mapping of the NIST cybersecurity framework, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, those categories that are underneath each of those 5 sections, and then a mapping to when you do those particular actions, the particular controls that you get credit for doing there. Then manage and assess the risk through risk assessments, occasionally looking back and making sure that you're not just staying busy, but working on things that are representative of the highest risks to you and your respective organization. And then for me, I love this. I call this the money slide, this idea of my current state assessment that's shown in the dark colors here, aligned to the NIST cybersecurity framework, and then also having this alignment towards a maturity capabilities, and then casting vision for what would it look like in the future if we improve by taking certain actions to improve our capabilities at measuring at the cybersecurity framework to improve that on purpose, intentionally, and by design. And again, when we do that, we can measure, we can monitor with metrics, and give many example measures and metrics with respect to the control. So again, an overview of what to expect from this, and wanted to really set the stage and level set as Randy is about to start now and give us a review of what actually changed with version 8 of the controls. Randy, all you.
Thanks a lot, Russell. So basically, we've been at version 7.1 of the controls for a number of years now. And what we're going to talk about here is what we've seen with the new version 8. So, what's new? So let's take a look and see what's new here with that. So for the first time, those of you that are familiar with the 20 critical controls, the first thing you'll notice is we don't have 20 anymore. We have 18 of them. What we've done is we've retired 1 or 2 of the controls, combined a couple of other controls, and added one extra control to deal with cloud computing. We're going to take a look at that in just a minute. But basically what we did was this is a reflection of how the technology has changed from when the controls first came out. So let's see what we've got in our next slide here. This is basically a list of all of the controls. If you read it across, those of you, again, who are familiar with the controls, some of these will look very familiar to you. Controls number 1 and 2, inventory of your hardware, inventory of your software assets. The big change for us in this one was we moved data protection to control number 3, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. We have our good buddy that used to be control 5, now secure configuration of enterprise assets and software. We've got account management, We have Control 6, access control management. Number 7 is the tried and true one of doing continuous vulnerability management and assessment. If you don't do vulnerability scans against your assets, you know for sure the attackers will. Audit log management is now control number 8. Email web browser protection is control number 9. Malware defense is 10. Data recovery 11. Network infrastructure is a combination of the old boundary defense controls with the secure configuration for network devices. And then we have network monitoring and defense, which is another combination of previous controls. 14, security awareness and skills training. New title for it, but basically it deals with technical awareness, technical and user awareness training. If you don't have good, well-trained end users as well as technical staff, that is quite a danger to your organization. One of the new ones is Control 15, service provider management. This has more to deal with the cloud infrastructure that we're seeing and being implemented today in today's technology. Application software security, number 16, incident response, and pen testing, number 18. These are controls that should be familiar to you from the previous version, 7.1. So let's see what we got next. Okay. Again, we've added this control for cloud services. CIS has developed what we call companion guides to the critical security controls. And these companion guides are great. They show you how each of the individual controls map to certain things. A new one here is the Cloud Companion Guide, but there's ones on mobile devices. There's one on a measurement, how to measure your progress through the controls. So we've added, this is one of the new things that's changed. In addition to what we see here, we have a couple of other things. We've rearranged the controls in the first 3 controls into what we call inventory. We started off as always with, you have to know what your hardware is. Where is it? What is it? How long has it been in your network? Same thing for software inventory, control number 2. The big change that we did was we elevated data protection and data discovery and data inventory, all of this into this 3rd inventory class. As I always used to say, a lot of states don't have device breach notification laws. They have data breach notification laws. And so that's why we elevated data and sensitive data in particular as more and more states develop data breach notification laws, and we start having privacy laws, especially those in Europe, and regulations that are starting to affect how we handle sensitive data. So this is one of the big changes that we've made here in the controls. Okay. So in our next slide, we've got some supplemental guides and tools also in there. There's all sorts of mappings. There are a number of scripts and sites. Auditscripts.com is one great resource for getting a mappings framework that shows how each of the controls maps to a wide variety of standards, ranging not only US standards, but international standards. Singapore, Saudi Arabia, Canada are some of the international countries that are whose standards we can map to a control. And so there's lots of these types of tools and guides out there for you to reference as well. In addition to what you see here in this slide, we have some, again, as I talked about, all this national legislation stuff. When an auditor says, what's your security strategy based on? Well, ours is based on ISO 27002 and NIST 800-53. And so we can look at these frameworks and these guides here that I was talking about and show how each control maps to certain subsections of those standards and frameworks that we're using. Okay. So in our next one here, we have what we call implementation groups. These are tailored for small and medium enterprises. Implementation group 3 is a large organization that's got a relatively mature, security infrastructure in terms of staff, audit staff, and things like that. Implementation group 2 IG2, that we call it for short, is sort of a medium-sized organization that has some moderate resources in terms of personnel and skill level, and for dealing with, to implement the sub-controls in each of these critical controls. And then you have implementation group ones. These are smaller organizations with limited resources. There may only be 4, 5, 6 people doing IT work, and everybody's got to wear a different hat. So we have these implementation groupings set up to help you, decide where your organization fits in. Okay. So in our next slide here, then we also have, there's lots of pointers to white papers and other materials that people have written that show how they implement the controls. A number of talks. Russell and I have done numerous talks on various implementation schemes for the critical security controls, both in the SANS classes we teach and in normal presentations like this one. And we also want to make sure that everybody understands that there are resources to help you show the alignment between the critical security controls and the NIST cybersecurity framework. Okay? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Russell. Take it away.
You got it. Thank you, Randy, for sharing that. And again, talking about the highlights, what has changed, what stayed the same, to help us wrap our minds around the change from version 7.1 to version 8.0. And certainly encourage any questions that you have, build up those questions, go ahead and send them our way. We'd be happy to answer those questions. But one thing that's really important to Randy and I, as we're wanting to communicate the differences and partnering with friends at CIS to help you understand what's changed and why it was necessary to change at this time, and really launching this version in alignment with the RSA conference. We wanted to not just talk about that, but give you some practical guidance, give you some ideas from best practices that we've experienced, from ways to implement the controls, both at Randy's organization and organizations I've been privileged to work at in the past, for companies that want to lean in and take action. A couple of ideas that we wanted to share with you here. One, give yourself a little grace to say, okay, let me take time to digest this. Let me take time to understand this. And then for you to determine when's the right time. Work with some clients. Some of them are eager to get to and have assessments against version 8, while others prefer to wait a little bit and just do a wait and see approach to see when does it make most sense for them. And so your approach will vary, but spend some time to digest the materials that we have and information that we'll share links for coming up at the end of the presentation, so you can go to the CIS website and get that and make that decision for yourself. Give yourself a little bit of a grace, but not too much, to understand that, but then have actionable steps to determine when's the right time for you to do that. Focus on 2 to 3 controls at a time. You didn't get where you are overnight. You're not going to get where you want to be overnight. And so being able to understand what is the most important areas for you to focus on in your journey at applying these controls. 3 to 5, 6-year projects sometimes, if you start from not having done this before and you want to move in the direction of applying these controls and building the momentum. Again, you have the opportunity to create and sustain some momentum by having projects, maybe project managers, maybe funding, maybe support for these initiatives. But make sure that you don't try to solve all this overnight, all this even over a year or two, but instead create and sustain some momentum, brag to your boss, show off to your boss, your leadership, your governance, your board, to show where you're headed and how heading this way makes a lot of sense for your respective organization. And then just recognize you need to go do it again, remind your leadership, remind those that you're privileged to lead where you're at and where you're headed, and how some of the anchor points that we gave earlier can help you communicate that status much more clearly. More practical implementation tips here. One thing that's super important as well is to find a champion. Find someone maybe on your executive or your leadership team who can represent you. Equip them with information so that when they go to meetings that you don't get to go to, or they have conversations that you don't get to be a part of, they're armed and equipped to be able to talk about at a high level why you're focusing on the controls, why you've chosen to go ahead and assume the usage of version 8 of the controls, and how it helps your business by aligning to mission, vision, values of your organization, and truly help protect your organization like never before. A key tool, and very happy Randy mentioned this before. Here's a link directly to it. Privileged to work with James and Kelly and others at Audit Scripts and Enclave Security. And we're so happy to be able to give you this capability to do a gap analysis to say, where are you right now with respect to version 8 of the controls? And where are some areas that where there's not a weakness or a gap, but just let's just say opportunities. The optimist in me comes out and says opportunities to improve on purpose so that we can, by design, make our programs more repeatable, more automation, perhaps even leveraging tools that you already have to be able to unlock capabilities that may be sitting there dormant that you can leverage for your organization. That's what I did when I first got introduced to the controls. I heard about success by major organizations in the United States who applied the controls. I was excited. I was motivated, but I was the security team. I was the whole team. There was nobody but me, and I didn't have any budget to buy any more tools, and started reading the fine manual, looking for how could I creatively solve this problem that were outlined in that version of the controls. And it was amazing how that unlocked the desire to find more, to have automation, and to really get a lot of those capabilities, even though I was the team, even though I wasn't able to get any additional funding. You may just find that there's ways to leverage some of these capabilities to move in the direction where large organizations sometimes struggle to achieve. It's a classic model of what's my current state? How do we understand that, accept that, and then have this desire, especially for you as a cybersecurity leader, to cast a vision for what would a better future look like? What would it look like if we improved on purpose and by design? And these tools, like we have here with the Audit Scripts free resources here, can help you to do just that. And then another thing is, who can help you? Who are some colleagues in your organization that can help you? Could it be the help desk? Could it be your sysadmins, application development teams, application owners, security awareness officers? There's a role to play for that as well. Our incident response team. How can you engage and equip them to help in this journey to improve your organization, again, by intention, by design, so that you can go further and go faster? Again, a lot of things where you can practically implement this and put together a plan to do just that. Turns out you've got some of the answers already. We've equipped you with what we talked about today, as well as in addition to some of the things that we've outlined in our presentation so far. You can see some of these changes, fundamental areas. Control 1, Control 2, Control 3 center around this concept of having a good inventory. How can we understand that inventory of our devices and our software? And again, a new ad is promoting this area of having an inventory of our sensitive data. This idea of when we have those capabilities and we start with 1 and 2 and 3 on purpose and by design, then future controls that we work on are easier. We can literally take the output for Control 1, our hardware, and use that as input for future controls so that it's easier to do things such as malware defenses or secure configurations for our workstations and our servers, because we know exactly the scope to where we're going to apply that. You can see that practical guidance of how the reasons that we have start here, and then when you have that capability, then you can move forward to future controls, and it'll be easier to do that when you follow the process that we've outlined in the controls. Again, good inventory can make the later controls be so much easier. All right, Randy, back to you.
So one of the things is, once you find out what you have, then you want to make sure that you've got a process to make them more secure from both internal unauthorized access and external unauthorized access. Typically, we call these minimum security standards. I always like to say you must be this tall to play in our network, where basically you want to have all the devices that connect to your network to be at a certain level of security settings and configuration. Old names like Gold Disk, STIG things, these were all some of the older terminology that was used. But the idea here is that you want to have, regardless of the type of hardware that's out there, you want to have a good policy structure, and you want to have good standards that give you the details of what the high-level policies talk about. it's really critical that you do get your upper management involved in this, because at the policy level, as Russell talked about, there's going to be a lot of politicking going on, especially when you're trying to find out who has the information that you need. A lot of this, as he mentioned, is already in your organization. The challenge for you, and both Russell and I, we're in the middle of implementing the controls at our respective organizations. The big challenge, of course, is finding out who's got the data and then getting it from them and making sure that you don't run into any bureaucratic resistance there. That's one of the key things that you wind up doing. I was lucky in the sense that I had a hand in the development of the policies and the standards. So when we were going through that vetting process, we kind of knew who had, the types of data that we need. But at the same time, you talk to one person and they'll go, oh, you need to talk to this person because they have a better idea of how this particular type of data is being used. You go see the bursar for your organization for a lot of financial controls. For us, our bursar, very, very bright woman. She just does, you ask her a question and she's got the answers you need for stuff like that. So finding out who has the information you need is a big key in helping you develop these standards. Some other stuff, of course, now that you've got these answers, then what's the next step? Well, let's see. You want to run your vulnerability assessments against your critical servers and assets. You want to do this on a weekly basis if you can. I came from the sysadmin world, being one for 25 years, and the last thing we ever wanted was somebody to run a vulnerability scan against our critical servers, because you could knock down the system and that could cause millions of dollars. And my retort is that if all it takes is a vulnerability scan to knock down a critical server, we have more serious problems to worry about. And then they go, oh, no, that's not what I'm talking about. So there's all sorts of ways to work that out. But it is really important that you do run a vulnerability assessment and fix the problems that you find. Because what's the number one thing that people do in pen tests? They recon your systems, they recon your networks, they recon your assets, and they're looking for these weaknesses. So you might as well get a jump start on that process and know what's out there and hopefully address and fix the problems that you find ahead of time. Malware defense, a lot of you already have malware detection tools. They could be commercial products like FireEye's, Dambalas. They could be antivirus software, Windows Defender, all sorts of things. Waza, for instance, for Linux systems, OSIM, OSEC. You may be using these tools already. And again, you want to leverage what you have in your toolkit already to help you with malware defenses. But to sort of emphasize what Russell was talking about, your biggest challenge is going to be getting the data from your business and IT units. When I go as the CISO and I say, hey, how's it going? Everybody kind of goes, why is he asking? How's it going, right? What's wrong? I go, no, nothing's wrong, but I need some information here. And then, well, why do you need the information? Well, I can't give you access. I said, well, I don't want access to your databases, but I would like a copy of the databases. And so you have to do a little bit of that type of, salesmanship. That's what you're going to be doing when you're implementing this. But that's going to be your biggest challenge, is getting the data that you need, especially for the first three controls, the inventory controls, and getting it from your business and IT units here. Okay. So once again, if you do have any questions, please ask them. We'll be glad to answer those for you. And so what we want to do here for our goal, apply what you've learned today. We've given you a landing page for the CIS version 8 controls. You can find out more about mappings of frameworks from the auditscripts.com site. And along the side of that, there's all sorts of other resources that are on those pages that you can follow the trail to get the information you need to help out. Russell, I think you would agree with me when we would both say that this is an auditable operation. It strengthens your overall defensive posture. I'm a big fan of playing defense. I'm hired as the CISO to defend my organization's assets, data, hardware, and software. We're not a pen testing company, but my job is to defend. It's blue team. And this gives me a good way to map out my defensive strategy. So again, email us with questions. Let us know what we've got. And let's see what we have here to end our little session. Again, my contact information is here. Again, email address. The only thing I'd ask you to do is if you say, put down RSA 2021 in the subject line, so I've got some context for you. And Russell's contact information is here in this slide here. We want to thank you for attending and joining us in this talk. We hope that we gave you a good starting point. And Russell, you got anything else to say?
I'll just say, echo what you said, Randy. What a privilege it was to work with the team to help put this together and then represent and be the mouthpiece here at RSA Premier Security Conference to launch and outline the steps that you can do to learn more about and at the right time decide to implement and apply version 8 of the controls. We believe it's a repeatable process. It's a way that you can make it easier to communicate what you're doing and why you're doing it. And with so many people involved literally around the world doing this, you've got a whole community backing you, supporting you, and cheering for you. I know that you can do it.
Right. We'll see you later.